Mr. Speaker, can I welcome the swift and decisive action this government is taking to secure our borders after the party opposite lost control? After the party opposite lost control, Mr. Speaker. And in particular, can I welcome the world-first deal struck with Iraq last week to tackle smuggling gangs? Does the Prime Minister agree with me that international cooperation, shared intelligence and joint law enforcement is the best way to end the vile smuggling trade?
I thank my honourable friend. She's a superb champion for her constituents. And she's absolutely right. The previous government left a broken asylum system. We put a plan in place, the Border Security Command, backed by £150 million, 100 more NCA officers, and we're introducing counter-terrorist style powers. And my friend is right that our new international coordination, including the landmark Iraqi agreement. And the hard graft is already beginning to pay off because 9,400 people who've no right to be here have been returned. That's a 30% increase on the numbers of last year. They promised to get the flights off the ground. We've got them off the ground.
We come to the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister talks about immigration. I think it's probably a good time to remind him that he was the one writing letters asking us not to deport foreign criminals. And he and his party voted against every single measure that we put in place to try and limit immigration. But, Mr. Speaker, the question today is what has been on the lips of all Labour MPs, including, I believe, the Health Secretary yesterday. The Prime Minister knowingly appointed a convicted fraudster to be his Transport Secretary. What was he thinking?
Mr. Speaker, the previous Transport Secretary was right when further information came forward to resign. What a marked contrast to behaviour in the last 14 years. And she talks about immigration, record levels of immigration under the previous government, nearly 1 million. And she was the cheerleader. She was the one urging on the removal of the caps for work visas. She was thanking the previous Home Secretary for the work that was done. She championed it, she advocated it. Record numbers of immigration.
Mr. Speaker, he's obfuscating, but I'm going to keep him on the topic. He owes the House an explanation. He said that the former Transport Secretary was only asked to resign after further information came to light. What was that further information?
I'm not going to disclose private conversations. Further information came to light. The Justice Secretary resigned. As I say, what a marked contrast. But whilst she's obsessing with the Westminster issues, we're getting on with fixing the mess, fixing the foundations, that £22 billion black hole, our prisons bursting, Mr. Speaker, as we found out last week, nearly 1 million net migration numbers because of the Tory open borders policy.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not asking about migration. I'm asking about the former Transport Secretary. He never answers any questions. He never answers any questions. And it looks like he didn't ask his Transport Secretary any questions either. The truth is, he appointed a person convicted of fraud to the Cabinet. The first thing she did was bung hundreds of millions of pounds in pay rises to her trade union friends. Wasn't this a fraud on the British people?
No, Mr. Speaker, she says she's not talking about immigration. I'm not surprised. And I advise her and all of them not to talk about the economy or immigration for another 5 years.
Mr. Speaker, he can try and change the topic as much as he likes, but the public are watching. He owes them an explanation. The country needs conviction politicians, not politicians with convictions.
She campaigned to remove the cap on migrant worker visas, and now she pretends she's furious about the open borders policy of the last government.
Mr. Speaker, the fact is the Prime Minister has discarded his own Labour leadership promises. He's dropped the 5 missions he said would define his government. He's ditched his pledge to make Britain the fastest-growing economy in the G7. We left office with UK the fastest-growing economy in the G7. And business is saying he has damaged the economy with his budget. Tomorrow he's going to have an emergency reset, Mr. Speaker, just 5 months into his premiership. But why should anyone believe a word he says?
Mr. Speaker, the only relaunch on that side of the House is the leadership bids of her rivals. She obviously hasn't read the OECD report of this morning, the fastest growth in the next 2 years of any major economy in Europe. We're proud of that. And they should never be allowed to forget the damage they did to our country. They used Britain like some sort of mad scientist experiment. Open borders, unfunded tax cuts, neglected health service. And now, all the madness is still coming out. They say they should be back in office. They haven't listened, they haven't learned, and they certainly haven't changed. There's only one party that's driving this country forward, and that's this Labour government.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has rightly spoken about the need to restore and rebuild the public's trust in British politics. Now, we believe a crucial part of that is reforming our electoral system to make it fairer and more proportional. And so does a majority of the British public. And this House voted yesterday in favour of a bill for electoral reform put forward by my honourable friend, the member for Richmond Park. So will the Prime Minister find government time, make it available, so we can consider this bill on electoral reform and restore the public's trust in our politics?
Look, proportional representation is not our policy. We won't be making time for it. And I just gently say to him, he didn't do too badly under the system as it is.
Red David.
Well, I'm disappointed in that reply and hope he will reflect on Labour's own policy.
Everyday pensioners in my Leicester South constituency are emailing me with one word, and that word is frightened. Susan, who has pulmonary fibrosis, wrote, "During winter, I rarely go out as it is too cold for my lungs. I need to keep warm and I need to keep my heating on. The winter fuel payment was really, really helpful." She writes, "I want MPs to know that not all pensioners are millionaires or receive gifts from millionaires, nor do we all get the higher rate of pension. Susan is frightened she won't be able to keep her house warm this winter, and she is not alone. Does the Prime Minister realise how frightening it is for the 8,100 pensioners in my constituency who have lost their winter fuel payment fuel payment help? As the winter month starts to bite, will the Prime Minister come to Leicester to explain to Susan why he thinks this policy is not frightening?" Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, as he knows, the #1 job of this government was to get our finances back in order after the mess that the last government made, including leaving a £22 billion black hole. We had to take tough choices. They say they want the benefits, but they can't say how they're going to pay for them. We do want to make sure that the most vulnerable pensioners do get the pension credit that they're entitled to. We're driving that up. But because we're stabilising the economy, we can commit to the triple lock. That's a £460 uplift in the pension next year. So every pensioner will be better off under a Labour government.
Andrew Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Daily Record reported that Scottish Labour MPs are very upset. Apparently, this upset is caused by their Scottish leaders' diktat that they now have to support the very winter fuel payment that they voted against in this place. As the Prime Minister comforts his upset MPs, will he remind him that the only people with the right to be upset are the 900,000 Scottish pensioners who were left in the cold by Labour's cuts?
Hear, hear, hear.
I work very closely with Scottish Labour in a harmonious way. We ran a fantastic campaign earlier this year, which is why she's sitting up there and not down here.